Look, I originally started off in 1981 in the so-called right wing. I got involved in politics when I was 31 years old, and I don't want to say unfortunately, but I did join the AWB at that time, and for a year, or just like less than a year, then I left the AWB because I realized that things were not going the way it should go, and the ideology in that was wrong. Because I myself was also, I thought of myself as an Afrikaner.
Right.
Now, the terminology between Afrikaner and Boer is a very, very, very delicate matter, especially in South Africa as well. But it is made more delicate by politicians, people that are involved in groups, freedom groups, freedom, like for instance, the AWB. The AWB stands for the Afrikaner Resistance Movement, if I translate it directly to English.
Yes.
Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging. But in 81, the AWB started getting tremendous support, but the support came after they started growing after old Robert van Ton of the old Boer State Party, the Boer State Party. And my brother, who was in the AWB, they brought him into the top structure of the AWB, and he was a medical doctor. And they started propagating the idea of returning to the Boer republics. I was reinstating the Boer republics. And that is when the AWB actually started growing. But the problem is they were talking on the one hand about the Afrikaner resistance movement. Now, Afrikaner in South Africa, or for the world, I don't know how you people know if you know the difference between an Afrikaner and a Boer. If one goes to Europe, I haven't been there a lot, but I know of a lot of people. If you go to Europe, for instance, and people talk about Afrikaners, the people in Europe sort of look at you and say, "What is that?" But when you speak about the Boer, then a lot of people's eyes sort of brighten up and say, "Oh yeah, we remember the Boers. What's happened to them?" Because the world remembers the Boer wars against Britain. It is the most devastating, the most costly war that Britain had ever fought in its history. And Britain was nearly degraded by the war against a small little band of rebels. They used to call us Boers in a sense, nearly like a pig, that we were just like scum of the earth, basically, and thought they would walk over us in like a month or what. But it took them nearly 3 years to defeat the Boers.
And the way they did it was yes, by killing your women and children, putting them into death camps, by burning their plows. That's how they did it. They couldn't beat you on the battlefield. The Boers were
they couldn't.
The Boers were veld fighters, fighters from the bush. And just like the Boers beat the Cubans in Angola, the British were losing. So they resorted to a policy of genocide, of which hurt your folk extremely hard to this day. That's why the Boers and nations around the world closely examined that war, because they watched how an army like Great Britain, which had the greatest empire in history, was getting beaten by a bunch of humble farmers who just wanted to be left alone, who didn't covet anything from the British, but the British wanted to steal their land, the British robbers.
That's quite correct. But there's something that I've got to add there. In this war where you mentioned that they took our women and children, I'd like to reverse that, because this is part of propaganda, and this has been a tremendous part of propaganda to try and kill the Boer nationalism and to destroy the Boer's identity. And I totally reject the idea of the Boer women and children, and I reject the idea of the Vroue Monument, the women's monument in Bloemfontein, because this was set up for a reason by the politicians, and it should have been called the Boer Children's Monument. And the simple reason is, Frank, that in that war, in the concentration camps, also when people talk about it, they talk about 27,000 women and children were killed. or died. They never say Boer women and children. They say women. But when they speak at meetings, then everybody says Afrikaner, not Boers. But unfortunately, I totally reject it as a Boer because there were 24,000. Can you hear that clear? 24,000 Boer children were killed, died in those concentration camps, and only 3,000 women. So it is ridiculous, and it is atrocious, and it's propagandistic to say that women and children died. It should be the other way around. It is were children and women that died, because there were very few women that died. And the 24,000 Boer children is close to 50% of the Boers' child population that were killed in the concentration camps.
That's incredible.
You see, this is a propaganda. Even the people in South Africa who are known as Afrikaners in South Africa, and the majority of them still think of themselves as Afrikaners, because Milner, after the Boer War, very few people also realized that in 1905, the Boers were planning to go on a third Boer War against British. Very few people know this. But in 1905, the Boers started talking about going back to war against Britain. Now, the reason being that, the Boers didn't lose their freedom. If you look at the Treaty of 1902 at Vereeniging between the British and the Boers, that treaty was very close to not being signed, because a lot of Boers rejected it, and De Wet as well, because they said we will not give up our freedom. It was like a seizure of hostilities. Actually, it was not a handover, because the 7th article said that at the earliest possible date,